somehow it's week 12 of college football. I don't know how this happens every single year. Here we are. It's unfortunate that the season goes by so fast, but that's how exciting it's been. Let's dive into week 12 and make some previews and predictions. We'll start with Tuesday night. We have action, of course, Toledo and Miami of Ohio. This is a very interesting game for those diehards in college football. DeQuan Finn, who's Miami, Ohio's starting quarterback, former Toledo quarterback for multiple years, faces his old team. And this is a game that holds huge weight for the MAC title race. Right now, there are a number of teams, 9 teams, that are able to continue their chances of winning that title. And this is a big time game that should have major weight, like I said, in this race. Now, Toledo has not lived up to expectations this year. It hasn't been the best year for the Rockets, but there's still some good things about it. Tucker Gleason has been a solid piece to that offense. Chip Trainum, they added him in the transfer portal. Great addition to that rushing attack. The defense at times has looked really good, but there have been some weaknesses as well. Now, Miami of Ohio went through a bit of a roster change. They bring in Finn to potentially steady that offense, and he's done so far. Toledo's a 3.5-point favorite. I do think that they're the better team still. Miami, Ohio, though, if they have some tricks up their sleeve, then maybe they'll have a chance to win this one. But this is going to be one, if you're looking for a Tuesday night game to watch, this is one that I highly recommend. Sticking to weekday games, Troy at Old Dominion. Now, Troy is bowl eligible, which is surprising for a lot of people. You look at what they did last year, and there were concerns about this team coming into this season. Now, Gerard Parker has done a great job of turning this team around and getting them to this point, and they're still technically in contention for the title race, but this is going to be a tough one. Old Dominion has been a tough team to beat throughout the entire year. Stopping Colton Joseph in this offense is going to be Troy's biggest obstacle. If they're able to do that, if they're able to slow him down, then maybe they have a chance. The problem is that this offense is so explosive that it's tough for teams to slow them down, to stop them. And Colton Joseph has played really well and consistent for most of the year. So Old Dominion is going to be a tough team to beat. I'm going with the Monarchs to win this game. They're 11.5-point favorites. Troy, it's still a great story, but playing a team like Old Dominion requires a different level that I don't know if the Trojans have right now. Clemson at Louisville, a game that should have a monumental weight on the ACC title race, but unfortunately, we're in a little bit of a different situation. Clemson is 4-5 this year, one of the worst seasons that we've seen under Dabo Swinney, and Louisville is coming off of a tough loss. So this is not exactly the momentum you wanted coming into this game. This is not exactly the hype you wanted coming into this, and Louisville's still a 3.5-point favorite. That's how poorly Clemson has played this year. And I don't know if they necessarily have what it takes to pull off an upset. Louisville's just been so solid. And if you like defensive line play, this is a good game for you. If you're not really concerned about the quality of the teams, then you do have some options. You do have some really exciting players to watch on the defensive line. Clemson's defensive line is still a problem. Louisville's defense line is super underrated. If you've watched them this year, you know the quality of player that you're getting on a consistent basis, and that's going to be tough for Clemson to navigate. This is going to be a tough test for the Clemson Tigers on the road, and the fact that this game's at Louisville is why I'm going to go with the Cardinals. Minnesota at Oregon. Minnesota is 6-3, Oregon's 8-1, and Oregon is a 23.5-point favorite. They're coming off of a win over Iowa, one they had to sneak out on a last-second field goal, and they are looking to build some momentum as they head into the college football playoff. The Big Ten title race is probably not an option for them, so they are looking to turn their attention towards the postseason. Now, Minnesota has struggled with teams like Oregon this year and in multiple different ways. You look at the game against Ohio State, a team that was way more talented than Minnesota, they got destroyed. Oregon is a more talented team than Minnesota, which is why I'm going to pick the Ducks to win this game. But I'm curious to see how Minnesota handles it. Now, Oregon's also a different team than we've maybe been used to. They're not the flashy, spread them out, go a million miles an hour anymore. They have the ability to play a physical style of football. And Minnesota struggled with a similar team in those Iowa Hawkeyes earlier this season. So Oregon is a team that is more talented than them and plays a style of football that Minnesota has struggled with. I'm very concerned about how quickly this one can get away from Minnesota, but that will tell me the resiliency of this team. We knew this team was going to take a little bit of a step back this year, but how do they continue to fight, continue to show that they're building towards the future? That is the big question I have. And to play against an Oregon team that's this good on the road in Autzen Stadium is always going to be a big time challenge. And Minnesota has to show us something to prove that there is a lot of hope for the future long term. Wisconsin at Indiana. Wisconsin's coming off an upset win over Washington. Indiana survived on one of the most incredible plays that we've seen this year against Penn State. Indiana is a 30.5 point favorite, which is insane. Wisconsin has not been good this year. Luke Fickell got a vote of confidence from the administration, so he's not going anywhere, but this is going to be a tough one for Wisconsin. Their quarterback rotation continues. Maybe they found something in Carter Smith. Who knows? This is going to be a tough one. Indiana is just an absolute wagon. They are running through pretty much everybody that they play, and they are very focused on winning a Big Ten championship. They're winning at an impressive clip, and I'm very excited to see how this team performs going down the stretch, because this is a very good football team. Wisconsin does not nearly have the talent to compete in this one, and it's just a matter of what score does Indiana pick to win this one. South Carolina at Texas A&M. Texas A&M still undefeated, having one of the more impressive years, and they have an argument to be the best team in college football. We'll see if the playoff committee agrees with that, but right now they are playing a good style of football that's been very fun for them. They've had players step up in a big way. And that's kind of been the big thing for Texas A&M this year. Texas A&M was a team that had some questions. Quarterback was a question. Wide receiver was a question. Defensive line was a question. All three of those positions have elevated their games higher than they were the year before. Marcel Reed has taken huge steps in his development as a passer. He's been a dynamic player, and it's not that he's just a dual threat that got a little bit better. He's been very confident and making a lot of impressive throws as a quarterback. He's been that good. That's a very exciting player to watch, and really another guy that you just have to worry about with Texas A&M. We knew the rushing attack was going to be fine. We knew that the running backs were good and Marcel Reed was good. But what Reed did as a passer was always going to be a question. Now, the other question with that is, what were the wide receivers going to look like? You had Mario Craver coming in, but I don't think a lot of people expected him to have the role that he did. Casey Concepcion, people expected big things from him. And so far this year, he has delivered. He has been as expected. The thing with this group is Mario Craver has exceeded expectations. Leading the team in receiving, he's been explosive. And early in the year, when they had a little bit more to figure out and maybe there were some more struggles, he was a player that stepped up in a massive way. He made some big time plays. He kept drives alive. He extended drives, and he was a big reason why they remained undefeated. Now this team has figured things out. They appear to be playing with good chemistry, and they are a tough team to stop. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, the defensive line had a question. You lost 3 NFL draft picks, and people naturally were wondering, what is this defensive line going to do? How disruptive can they be? Cassius Howell was a guy that people knew, but they didn't expect him to do big things. Even in Aggieland, I think people had questions about, okay, what is our defensive line going to look like? What are we going to do? And Texas A&M just said, well, don't worry about it. We're fine. We got it. Cassius Howell lived up to the hype. There wasn't that much hype. I think people saw his potential. I think that people saw his upside, but they didn't think, oh, this is going to be our next superstar at defensive line. This is a guy that's going to lead us to where we want to be. And he has done that and more this year. And the defensive line as a whole has played really well. And you have to give Mike Elko credit for that. You knew that he was going to fix some things. You knew that what he saw last year was not acceptable based off some of the comments he made, some of the things that he said. You knew that he was expecting bigger and better things for this Texas A&M defense. And they have delivered. Now, do they have their flaws? Yes, there are some things that obviously need to get sorted out, but they are much better than they were last year. The defensive line is a huge reason for that. The secondary has been playing really well. I don't think we talk about them nearly enough because the defensive line has been playing so well. But Will Lee is very good. That secondary has been disruptive. They've created turnovers, and they've been really tough to throw the ball on. Now, they do have a tough player to guard in Nick Harbor in this game, but you have so much confidence that this team will figure that out. And so far, teams have figured out South Carolina's offense. They have figured out that, hey, this offensive line is not going to give Lenore Sellers time to throw, and that's a great matchup for Texas A&M to exploit. Now, Lenore Sellers is still very talented. The problem is that he's struggling mightily. He is not taking the steps that people expected him to take. Marcel Reed is doing what people thought Lenore Sellers was going to do this year. And it's not that Lenore Sellers doesn't have it in him. It's just that this offense has been so bad at times, and the offensive line is not giving him any time to throw. Some of that is on him. Some of that is he's just got to find ways to develop. But this is a guy who clearly has the talent to potentially make strides like this, and he just hasn't. There's been a number of things that's not all on him. But I'm curious to see what is his future with this program. What is his future as a quarterback? What does that look like? Because people were talking about him as a potential number 1 overall pick coming into this year, and he's looked anything but. That is a big concern, and it's really on Shane Beamer to hire the right offensive coordinator for next year. You have to find someone that's going to be able to develop Lenore Sellers, assuming that he stays. Right? Maybe he's looking elsewhere. I don't think that's the case, but there's always that question, unfortunately, in college football now. If someone's not living up to the hype, not meeting expectations, where are they going to go next? That's always a question people ask. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think that he is very much happy with being at South Carolina. It just comes down to putting him in a better position. This team's way too talented to be 3-6, plain and simple. And I think Shane Beamer's still a good head coach. I don't have any concerns about him being able to do it. I don't have to worry about my feelings or second guess my feelings about Shane Beamer as a head coach. I think he's a good head coach. This has just been a tough year. I don't think you go from having the year they did last year to just all of a sudden not knowing how to coach. I don't think that is a thing you have to worry about with Shane Beamer. So this is going to be an interesting test for this South Carolina team on the road. What do they show to keep their competitive juices going? What do they show to us? That's a big question. Because Texas A&M is in a great position to win football games. They are a consistent team. They are tough to stop offensively. They're tough to block defensively. They're 18.5-point favorites. And it just is easy to pick Texas A&M right now. I think that's where you have to go. I think that's where this game is going. But there are still things to keep track of with South Carolina. There are still storylines to follow. And whether or not they show any sort of fight might be a big question for them going into this game. Notre Dame at Pitt. This is Notre Dame's last tough test of the college football season, and Pitt has been a surprise so far in the ACC. They're 7-2, just like Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 10.5-point favorite. Now, Notre Dame has been an interesting team to watch because their 2 losses came in the first 2 games of the season. They started out 0-2, and now they've won 7 straight. Whether or not they belong in the playoff is the current biggest topic of conversation with the Fighting Irish. You look at their schedule, you look at their resume, that's going to be a hot topic. That is going to be a big debate point. Now, does this team look like a playoff team if you purely go off the eye test? I think so. I think they look like a playoff team. Their offense is physical. Their offense looks explosive at times. The defense is making plays. There are things that you can say in favor of Notre Dame that put them in that position. Now, whether or not they're actually a playoff team is going to be up to the committee. Right now, they believe that they are a playoff team. They're 10th in the country. They're doing a lot of good things. And again, they've won 7 in a row. So it's hard to argue with people that are going, I mean, you can argue all you want, but the committee ultimately is going to decide if Notre Dame is a playoff team or not. And this is the final test, or at least the final opportunity for Notre Dame to make an impression, a positive impression. So we'll see what they do in this game, because this is a Pitt team that is sneaky difficult. And we'll dive more into the Panthers here in just a little bit. CJ Carr has shown his moments, right? He's been very impressive at times. He's also shown some really irresponsible freshman type mistakes. Those are going to be things that he has to filter out. And part of it is that he is He's just a young player that is figuring things out, that he is just going through the development process. And no, I don't think anybody expected him to be polished by any means. But some of those mistakes you've seen, you're like, what are you doing? Some of the throws, I've seen some of the throws he's made, and it's clear that he's just trying to make a play, and his brain just almost like short circuits, and he makes the decision that makes you question competency, which is not a thing you can question with CJ Carr, but some of the throws he makes, you're just like, wow, buddy, what are we doing here? But that being said, this is a guy who's completing nearly 68% of his passes. He's thrown 19 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. So it's clear that he knows what he's doing as a passer. He's figured out how to get in rhythm. Now, the nice part for him is his running backs are in a groove right now. Jeremiah Love has figured out his sweet spot, and I don't know what they were doing early in the year. I don't know if he had an injury. The play calling for Jeremiah Love, or the lack of usage by him or for him, didn't make any sense. They have since found a groove that makes sense, and he's having a phenomenal year. 988 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns. The nice thing is the compliment to him, Jadarian Price, 568 yards, 6 yards per carry, and 9 touchdowns. So that rushing attack has really hit its stride, and at a good time. They need this rushing attack to lead them. They need this offense to play well. And if the rushing attack is doing its thing, the offense finds balance. Now, the passing attack has been a little bit unexpected in terms of who's stepped up. We've seen some injuries kind of hurt them. Jaden Grayhouse hasn't been a factor as much as we'd like to see him this year because of that. Jordan Faison has kind of similarly to Love and Price hit a little bit of a groove. 43 catches for 545 yards to lead the team, 3 touchdowns. Malachi Fields has been a big time threat, and I think that was a nice addition by them via the transfer portal this offseason. 497 yards, he's averaging nearly 20 yards per catch and 3 scores as well. Eli Raridan has been a focal point of the offense at times. I think at times that they have just decided that he is their target, and he creates some mismatches just purely based off his size. And we knew that he was going to be a factor coming into this year, and now we get to see that on a consistent basis. So that's been fun to watch as well. Will Pauling's had his moments for this offense. I think Mike Denbrock's done a great job of hitting his groove as well. Early in the season, everybody looked like they just weren't quite in sync. They weren't quite ready executing plays. Denbrock didn't have his best performance as a play caller, I don't think. Now that is not the case. They have figured things out. They have found out what works for them. And this is a group that's playing really well. Now, the defense has kind of been, there have been some good things with this defense. There, you also saw the Texas A&M game and the struggles they had there. I think that they've done a good job of figuring some things out. They've sorted out some of their weaknesses. They've found ways to navigate that, and they have fixed some of those places they need to fix. Now, you've seen some good things with this front group. The secondary is where you had some concerns early in the year, but the secondary has really played well as of late, and they're playing with a ton of confidence, and they are making plays. All 4 starting DBs have at least 2 interceptions. You have a number of other guys that have factored in as well. You have Aiden Schuler, 2 interceptions. Tay Johnson, 3 picks. Leonard Moore, 3. Luke Talich, 3. Christian Gray, 2. You've had guys throughout the entire year show their talent and show their abilities. Now, there have been some concerns about, the play in the slot, in the nickel position. I think they've done a good job of rotating guys around and also providing different looks that maybe negate some of the offensive plans against them. So that's going to be a big factor here, especially with the quarterback that you're going in against. Now, for Pitt, a lot of the pressure lies on Mason Heinzel's shoulders. Since he's taken over at the starting quarterback position, over 1,500 yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Another young quarterback, though. So this is going to be a tough test. The nice thing is that it's at home, so you don't have to play against this Notre Dame defense on the road. You have the ability to kind of take things at your pace and make sure that you're comfortable enough to make the right play. make the right read. Now, the rushing attack has not been great for Pitt this year. Desmond Reed has struggled being on the field, and his explosiveness just hasn't been the same. You just haven't seen the same type of Desmond Reed that we are used to seeing. And I'm curious to know, like, is there some sort of lingering issue that's going on? I haven't really been too into Desmond Reed's status, but it's clear that something's not quite right. He's not 100%. The rushing attack plays a huge role here because you have to find ways to move the ball on the ground against this Notre Dame defense. You have to. You are in for a long day if you cannot run the ball. Now, the nice thing for Heinzel is that he has not really locked in on one guy. Kenny Johnson leads the team with 573 yards, but Raphael Williams, 525, Katarius Hicks, 353. Reed has been more of a factor in the passing attack. He is fourth on the team with 254 yards. So it's nice to have Heinzel be able to look for multiple options. And again, with a young guy, he is going to be under a lot of pressure. And so far, he's handled the pressure well. But playing Notre Dame is a much different test than playing any of the other teams that they've faced this year. So when you look at what this game means for Pitt, it's going to be tough to be able to win this type of a game. And I think that you've seen some good things from Mason Heinzel that give you excitement, but also this is a tougher game than expected. You look at the last games that this is the toughest game of the entire schedule. They played Stanford, NC State, Syracuse, Florida State, Boston College, Louisville, West Virginia, Central Michigan, and Duquesne. Their final three games are their toughest games by far. Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Miami. So that's going to be tough. I'm sorry, Mason Heinzel. That is a tough stretch for anybody to play. And it'll be fun, though. It's an opportunity for him to show what he can do. It's an opportunity for them to pull off a big-time upset and effectively end Notre Dame's playoff hopes. They are the underdog. They have nothing to lose. They have everything to gain, and it'll be fun to see if they play that way. Now, Pitt's defense is really where they have the potential to keep this one interesting. We talked about CJ Carr's struggles at times. This is a defense in Pitt, and Pat Narduzzi is going to have his group in a position to make plays. How do they confuse him? How do they make it so that he doesn't know what's going on? That is going to be a big question. And if Pitt's able to answer that question in their favor, then maybe they can pull off this upset. This is going to be fun. We've seen weird things at Pitt before. We've seen some weird things happen. This is going to be a potentially fun game to watch and a game that could surprise a lot of people. I'm going to go with Notre Dame. I do think they keep their playoff hopes alive, but don't sleep on Pitt. This could be a really entertaining upset if Pitt can figure some things out and find ways to create some extra possessions by forcing turnovers and getting the ball back to their offense. I think the fact that Michigan at Northwestern is a relatively bigger game says a lot about what Northwestern is doing. It doesn't really have much to do with Michigan because Michigan is still playing well, but Northwestern has stepped up in a big way. Now, Michigan is still a 10-point favorite in this one. They're 7-2. Their playoff hopes are still very much alive. Playing at Northwestern is a tough place to play. The atmosphere is going to be a tough one to compete in, but Michigan has done a good job of just continuing to make improvements, to continuing to take strides. Bryce Underwood, I think, is learning a lot this year, and while he hasn't looked the greatest as a consistent quarterback, he's still made some really nice plays, and he's shown a lot of things on film that tell you that he's going to be a fun quarterback in the future. Michigan's going to win this one. I don't think you have to question that, but this one is going to be an interesting one to watch and basically just see how Northwestern competes. Underrated Big 12 game, Arizona at Cincinnati. Arizona is 6-3, and Brent Brennan deserves so much credit for what he has done with that program. A lot of people expected them to be one of the worst teams in the Big 12, and the Wildcats are already bowl eligible. They're facing a Cincinnati team that is 7-2 and is looking to bounce back after losing to Utah in a tough way. That was a tough loss for them. They're still technically in the Big 12 title race, so this is still an important game for Cincinnati. They're 6.5-point favorites, and this will be an interesting competition between two underrated quarterbacks. Noah Fafita is having a good year for Arizona. Brendan Sorsby is on his way to a career season for Cincinnati. So if you like underrated quarterbacks, this is the one for you. The fact that this is at Nippert Stadium is going to give Cincinnati the edge. I'm going with the Bearcats. But again, Arizona and Brent Brennan deserve so much credit for the success that they've had so far this year. USF at Navy. Both teams are 7-2 and both are still in the running for the American Conference title. Now, this is going to be an interesting clash because these are two teams that play very different styles of football. USF is a 10-point favorite, and that tells you that if they're able to play their style, it's going to go in their favor heavily. Now, even if they don't get to play their style, their pace, they can still potentially win. Navy is just a little bit more methodical, a little bit more efficient with their possessions. This is going to be a tough test for both sides for different reasons. For USF, playing against this triple option is going to require a defense to be disciplined, require a defense to play fundamentally sound football and do their assignments. Play assignment football, get to the football, rally to the ball, make plays. This is going to be tough. Navy is going to make plays. Now, big question is whether or not Blake Horvath is going to be able to go. If he's able to go, this Navy team is a much different team. If not, this line could get way more in favor of USF. But this triple option attack is always going to be tough to defend. It purely is. You just have so much misdirection that you have to worry about. And if Blake Horvath is playing, you have a veteran player who understands this offense, the ins and outs, and how to make this offense play even better. That's going to be another difficult test. The rushing attack, obviously, is what you have to worry about with Navy. And they have multiple different body types that you have to defend. Blake Horvath is obviously the leader of this group. Alex Texas, the fullback that you have to worry about in terms of physicality. And then you have some different dynamic threats. Brandon Chapman and Eli Heidenreich have been really good as runners, but also they have developed as really impressive pass catchers as well. Heidenreich leads the team with 595 yards receiving. So he is someone you have to worry about just as much as Blake Horvath. That's going to be an interesting test for this USF defense. A USF defense that has also shown that it can shut teams down. The problem is that this is not your traditional offense. Navy is not going to give you your traditional looks. They're not going to give you anything that you've probably seen before. You have similar concepts, but the way that they dress it up, that they dial it up, is so different than anything that you've ever seen. Plain and simple. They just don't play things the same way as your traditional spread offense, and that's going to put a lot of stress on this USF team. A USF team that has a lot to lose, frankly. This is a team that still wants to make the college football playoff. They want to win the American title. And while Navy has those same goals, I think a lot of people put more pressure on USF than Navy. And Navy is a 10-point underdog. So they don't really have a ton to lose at this point, other than that you could say they have a ton with the American Conference title, but I don't think that they have as much to lose, nearly as much to lose as USF. Now for USF, you've had two games that have not been impressive, that have not gone your way. The Memphis loss, I think, is really stinging for this fan base because that was a game that USF felt like they should have won. They should have come away with a win. And to come up short in that one, I think really hurts this team, especially for the goals that they had. They had goals of winning the American Conference. They had goals of making to the college football playoff, and those goals are still alive. But now they're even more difficult because you just lost to a Memphis team on the road that is still also in that conversation. And you also might play them in the conference title game. So USF is looking for ways to keep their goals alive and win impressive performances, win impressive games, win impressive matchups. That's a game that if you are looking for the opportunity for a USF to potentially do that, this is one. Because you have to play disciplined. You have to show that you are so focused on the goal ahead. You have to show your focus in this one because it's late in the season. If you're not focused with all of this on the table, you don't deserve to be in the playoff anyways. So that's going to be a big thing. How focused can this team be? How dialed in can they appear? And how disciplined can they play? Now for the offensive side of the ball, once again, Byron Brown's going to do his thing, and I think that he can do a lot of damage to this Navy defense. I don't think Navy has the athletes. I know they don't have the athletes that USF does. But again, that focus, that discipline? How do you make the right read instead of just chucking it up, right? Not that Brown does that a ton, but how do you dial in? Because this is a team that can put up 50 points. They've scored 50 plus points in multiple games this year. This is an offense that can just destroy anybody they're playing. That is going to be a huge key for them. Are they able to dial in? Are they able to focus on what they need to do? Make the right read, make the right play. For the playmakers, the rushing attack has to continue to try and give Byron Brown some help. Nikai Davenport has been fairly good as of recently. He's averaging 7.1 yards per carry. The pass catchers have been good even when Chaz Nimrod's been out. Keyshawn Singleton, still a stud. Jeremiah Coger has taken his new opportunity and literally run with it. He's been so good for this team, and he has a bright future in college football. This offense has the ability to take this one and make it so that Navy doesn't have a chance. If this defense can get stops, create turnovers, that's what helps USF the most. That's what gets them in position to be able to run away with this one, because I think USF is the better team. I trust that they're going to be able to do a lot of good things in this one, but again, you have to play with that discipline. You have to be focused. Alex Golesh's staff has got a lot of work to do in terms of getting them ready for this one, but I do trust that they're going to be able to do that, and they're going to remind their team, this is what we're going for. This is what's still on the table. And if they play as disciplined as they're capable of, this one will go in USF's favor without question. I am picking the Bulls to win this one. I just don't think that, especially if they don't have Horvath, that Navy has the ability to keep this one close. USF is just so tough to defend defensively. And even if Navy is efficient, the Bulls have shown that, hey, we can still score in a hurry. And that puts so much pressure on the other team. So I'm going with USF to keep their American title hopes alive and to keep their playoff hopes alive as well. Arkansas at LSU. Arkansas is 2-7, but only a 6-point underdog heading into this game against a 5-4 LSU team. LSU just had their first game without Brian Kelly, and we saw exactly what we predicted. We saw some energy early, and then Alabama took control late. LSU has a lot of things to fix, and this is going to be a game that tells us how much they have in terms of, or how long of a ways they have to go. Because Arkansas is a team that, even though they're 2-7, can create some problems for the teams they're playing. Taylor Green is still one of the better quarterbacks in college football, and he does not get enough love for the things that he does. The problem is that their defense can't stop anybody. So if there's a game that LSU can get right offensively, Arkansas is about as good for anybody this year. If you need a team to play that's going to get your offense more confidence, play Arkansas. You want to score 40 points? Play Arkansas. You want to score 40 points, but also worry about if Arkansas is going to score 50? That's the perfect game to play. But LSU is a team that has a defense that can potentially shut down Arkansas. They have the opportunity to maybe get their offense on the right track. Maybe it might be a little late for that at this point, but at least you can show some signs for the future. You can show some things that whoever's taking over as the head coach at LSU, then maybe you feel good. I'm going to pick the Tigers to win this one, and this is a battle of two teams that fired their head coaches, and maybe these two current interim coaches are auditioning for the head coaching job. We'll see how they do, but I'm going with LSU to win this game. West Virginia at Arizona State. West Virginia is still holding on to their potential bowl eligibility, and they have two tough games against Arizona State and Texas Tech to do that. They're 4-6. They need 2 wins to get there, and it's going to be tough. Now, Arizona State is dealing with a lot of uncertainty. Jeff Sims so far has provided some stability with Sam Leavitt out, and we'll see if they can do it again. We'll see if they can do it against a West Virginia team that has suddenly found a little bit of momentum with 2 consecutive wins, and the Mountaineers are in a great position to potentially stun Arizona State. Now, that being said, they're 11.5-point underdogs on the road. That's a tough thing to do. That's a tough place to play, and I'm going to pick Arizona State because I just trust the talent that they have a little bit more. It was a fun run for Rich Rod's team, and if they're able to pull off the upset, it just continues, but at the same time, we'll see what happens. We'll see if they still have it in them to pull off this upset, or if Arizona State is just going to take control and move on from there. Oklahoma at Alabama. Alabama is a 7-point favorite and looking to continue keeping their SEC title hopes alive as they sit atop the conference with Texas A&M. Oklahoma looking to pull off an upset as 7-point underdogs. They've had some concerns this year, but also there are a lot of exciting things about this Oklahoma team that keeps them in a position to potentially win a big game like this. Now, when you look at Alabama and what they bring to the table, it's going to be tough to stop this offense. Now, if you're Oklahoma, you got to hope that your defense can play at the level that you need them to be able to win this game. Oklahoma's defensive line has been disruptive at times. And if you're going to slow down this passing attack, you need your defensive line to play its best game of the season. Ty Simpson has been very good, and he has continued to hold himself to a higher standard. It's clear that he was not expected to be this good by a lot of people, but it's clear that he believed in himself and he holds himself to that high standard. That to be able to play this well, especially after early season struggles. This is a guy who clearly has confidence in himself. But that kind of took a hit when you started off with a loss to Florida State. All they have done since then is shake that off and focus on what's at hand. What do they need to do to win? And when you have the amount of talent that he has at wide receiver, it's clear that he knows how to bounce back and play at a high level, to play at a level which allows him to be this good. Now, if you're Alabama, you need to find a way to run the football. Not necessarily in this game, but this has been something we bring up time and time again. The inability to run the football efficiently is going to catch up to them at some point, and they can't keep ignoring it. I'm not saying that they are, but you have to find a way to balance out this offense. Teams essentially are just going to sit back and say, okay, well, we know you don't want to run the ball, so we're just going to sit back and hope that you make a mistake. And last week, Ty Simpson wasn't playing his best game, but even with his B game, with his changeup, he's still a good quarterback. He still has the ability to make big plays. And even some of the misses that he had against LSU didn't miss by much. Now, again, that's where this high standard comes in, because he was not happy with himself. He was very upset with some of the decisions that he made, some of the throws that he made. And it's clear that he's not just going to accept those near misses. He wants to connect on every pass. And it's a big reason why he's had success. There's a big reason why he's only thrown one interception this year. 21-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio is going to do a lot of good things for your program. Now, it helps when you have the wide receiver talent that he does. And Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams have been kind of those go-to guys, but Loss Brooks and Isaiah Horton have stepped up as well. So it's not that one guy has just been doing it by himself. You've seen a few guys step up. And in a way, it's been guys that have stepped up in different games. It's not just, oh, well, one or two plays, this guy's going to do it. Isaiah Horton's had games where he's been the guy. And especially when Ryan Williams was dealing with his drops, that was huge. Having that depth gave you a little bit more balance. And this is such a different Alabama team than the first part of the season that you almost can't even count that, right? This is just not the same team. And the offense is going to get a lot of that scrutiny, those opinions. But the defense has also done a good job of elevating its game as well. They've done a great job of taking their game to another level. And when you look at these guys they have, you had some struggles early in the year. We had people questioning effort for Alabama's defense. And there were clips where it was like, what are we doing? And all Kalen DeBoer did was say, guys, let's focus on what we do internally. Let's focus on our process, and let's get better day by day. And they've done that. And now Alabama's defense looks like some of those Alabama defenses at times that we saw from Nick Saban. You have a group that has been disruptive, and sometimes the way they play really raises your eyebrows, gets your eyes real big, and you're like, wow, that's a group that can take over a game. Now they got to do that against Oklahoma. And this Oklahoma team, the defense has to do its part, plain and simple. They are going to be in an absolute dogfight. To be able to defend this Alabama team is going to be a struggle. Where they really can make a difference is offensively. Ben Arbuckle and John Mateer have to be dialed in. And if there's a game where you cannot have John Mateer do some of those things that he does, make some of those mistakes, it's this one. Your playoff hopes are on the line. You cannot have John Mateer just winging it. I know that's part of what makes him good. I know that's part of what makes him exciting to watch. But good grief, do you need him to be dialed in? You need him to have one of his best games that he's ever played in college. Because Alabama is such a different beast, especially when you're playing them on the road. The rushing attack has to figure out whatever's going on. It just hasn't been great. The passing attack has been fine. John Mateer is the guy that holds the key to this one for Oklahoma to be able to win this game. John Mateer is the X factor. John Mateer is going to be the reason that they could potentially win this game, because the defense is going to do its part and they're going to hang on for dear life at times. But if John Mateer is giving the ball away like he's done in the past, it's not going to be a fun day. So for Oklahoma to win this game, they need him to be disciplined, to be focused, to be locked in to his process, the offense's process, and make the right reads and decisions. If they do that, they're great. They're going to be just fine. They still may not win even if that does happen, because Alabama is so good. But if you want to have a chance in this one, you need him to be focused. That's why I'm going with Alabama. I trust them to be more disciplined, to be more dialed in, to be more focused on the task at hand. They're sitting at the top of the SEC, tied with Texas A&M in conference play. They need this one just as much as Oklahoma does. And right now I trust Alabama to get the job done more than I do the Sooners. UCF at Texas Tech. UCF is 4-5, Texas Tech 9-1, and 23.5 point favorites. I don't think a lot of people are picking UCF to win this game, but still one to keep an eye on. Texas Tech is kind of walking a thin line right now in terms of any slip-ups they're allowed to have, because this is a conference that is still very competitive, and Texas Tech needs to show that they continue to be dialed in, to be locked in. Now, one of the things that I need them to do is figure out a way to take Baron Morton out of the rushing attack. I talked about this earlier. I talked about why they're still doing it. I don't know. It just still bothers me apparently, but if they can find ways to keep him healthy, that is going to be the biggest key for them. If he's healthy, they have a great chance. If he's not healthy, they're screwed. Plain and simple. This game, not really going to have a huge effect at who's playing quarterback, but this is going to be a team to watch for the rest of the season. Can Texas Tech continue being a dominant team? So far, that answer has been yes, and this is another opportunity for them to do that. The ACC race just got a little bit more heated after last week. Virginia went down to Wake Forest, and they find themselves tied with a number of other teams. Duke is one of those teams. So while Virginia is 8-2 and Duke is 5-4, the Blue Devils are still in the conversation for the ACC championship. And the Blue Devils are favored by 6.5 points at home. Now, the big question for Virginia, what is Chandler Moore's status? Are they going to be able to play him? What is he going to be able to do for this team? That is a big question that Virginia has, and that might dictate the result of this one. Duke has been playing very well as of late, and I think that they are still a tough team for a lot of people to face. Darian Mensah looks really good. The offense is playing with a lot of confidence. The defense, while it's had its struggles, is also a group to pay attention to potentially give a lot of other teams issues with their performance. Now, Virginia has, again, if their quarterback situation is figured out, they're in good hands. If not, I worry that they're going to struggle in this one and fall behind a Duke team that, even though their overall record is worse, is going to take control of that ACC title race. I'm going with the Duke Blue Devils to win this one at home, and it will really depend on whether or not Chandler Morris can play. NC State at Miami. Miami is a 14.5 point favorite, and they still think that they have a chance at the college football playoff. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And NC State's a team that's been tough to beat, and they've actually pulled off a couple upsets this year. Now, Miami, whether or not their playoff hopes are actually alive is probably up for question. It definitely is up for debate, but this is a team that's still very good, and NC State is looking to knock them off. Whether or not Miami is really focused for the rest of the season is a big question. To be honest, I don't think Miami cares about playing for a bowl game. And if they get to a point where NC State is hitting them in the mouth enough, I'm going to be curious to watch how they respond. Are they going to still compete? Are they still going to play hard? If the playoff gets taken away from them, that is also going to be a big question. And we'll find out later in the week whether or not that is still in the cards for them, if the playoff is still an opportunity. Technically, they still have a chance, and that's why this game is so important. If they still have a chance, then they're going to play hard. If they still have a chance to make the playoff, then I don't trust that NC State has a chance to win this game. I trust that Miami's going to be focused. But if not, that's where I think Miami has a little bit more concerns. NC State is a tough team to beat. CJ Bailey's playing really well, but I'm going to pick the Miami Hurricanes to win this one. It really just depends on what's still available for them in the postseason. Iowa at USC. Iowa is 6-3, coming off a tough loss to Oregon. USC is 7-2 and 6.5-point favorites. They also have their playoff hopes still alive, so that's going to be something to pay attention to in this game. Now, if it was in Iowa, I'd have a lot of concerns about USC and what they need to do to be able to win this one. But the fact that it's at home and Iowa's coming off a tough loss to Oregon tells me I think the Trojans should be just fine. Now, it really comes down to which style of football is being played. Is this going to be Iowa style football, or is USC going to pick up the pace? Whichever team dictates the pace, I think, is going to win the game. Now, USC has done a lot of good things, but they've also struggled at times as well. Come off of a really interesting game against Nebraska 2 weeks ago. And that was one where it's like, this offense does not look good. They're not playing efficiently. That's going to be something they have to do in this one. And it really is going to tell us if they're worthy of playing in the playoff. If they can be efficient and handle the physicality of Iowa, they'll be just fine. I think Iowa's got a lot to figure out, and how they're able to bounce back from a tough loss to Oregon will show me a lot about whether or not they're prepared to compete in this one. Now, USC, I think, is in a better place. I think that they are going to be able to win this game and be able to dictate the pace to pull away in this one. App State at James Madison. James Madison's playoff hopes are still alive as well. And we talked about the group of five and its ability to potentially win a playoff game or just change their perception. James Madison is a team that has the potential to do that. They're 8-1. I've seen some good things from them. The offense is playing really well as of late. The defense has been consistent. App State is not really in a great place right now. They're still 4-5. Bowl eligibility still on the table, but beating James Madison is going to be tough. JMU is a 19.5-point favorite, and I think they're going to run away with this one. App State just hasn't had the defense to stop teams, and that's going to continue against Alonzo Barnett and the Dukes. Sticking in the Sun Belt, Texas State, 3-6. Not a great year for them. They're facing Southern Miss, who's 7-2. Southern Miss is James Madison's probably biggest obstacle to winning the Sun Belt, and they'll probably face off in the Sun Belt championship game. Southern Miss is a 6.5-point favorite, and while Texas State's coming off a loss to Louisiana, they're still a team that you have to prepare for. You still have to be disciplined, and Southern Miss is going to prepare just fine for them. Charles Huff has done a great job with this program, turning them around, and now they are big-time contenders in the Sun Belt and could be a major problem for a team's playoff hopes down the road. Memphis at ECU. This is a game that has a ton of weight for the American Conference Championship. ECU is still very much in that conversation. Memphis is coming off of a tough loss to Tulane, so they are looking to bounce back and ruin ECU's playoff hopes. This game is at ECU, and that makes things a lot different than if it was at Memphis. Now, the Tigers' biggest question for them is Bren Lewis going to be able to go? Is he healthy? That is the big question. We've seen him struggle with injury, especially last week. We saw him try to compete in the game, but it's clear that he wasn't 100%. If he's not able to go, that makes things a lot different. Right now, ECU is one of the hottest teams in the American Conference. I'm going to have them compete or continue that trend and be able to win this game, keep their American Conference title hopes alive. And this is a very dangerous team for a lot of teams in this conference. Florida got obliterated by Kentucky last week, and now they have to face a 9-1 Ole Miss team that is still in the running for the SEC title as well as the college football playoff. The Rebels are 15.5-point favorites and really don't have to talk about too much in this one. The biggest question for Florida is who's going to play quarterback? DJ Lagway got benched last week, and now there are questions about whether or not he's going to be the starter going forward. Ole Miss is playing just fine, and I think that they're going to continue with that play. They're going to continue winning and keep their momentum going. Utah at Baylor, an underrated Big 12 game. I don't think a lot of people are going to talk about that. We might dive into this one later in the week in a little bit more detail, but this is one to keep an eye on. Utah is 7-2. Their Big 12 title hopes are technically still alive, and Baylor is a team that, even though they're 5-4, I would still worry about them. They have the ability to put up points, and even though Utah is an 8.5-point favorite, I would not count out the Baylor Bears at home. Dave Aranda has a lot of work to do. That's a storyline to keep an eye on for this team. Whether or not he is going to be the head coach going forward, that is a question I think a lot of people are asking. It hasn't been the greatest year for them, so Aranda has to figure some things out. A win over Utah would kind of silence those critics, but it's going to be tough to be able to upset the Utah Utes, and I think that Utah is going to win this game, but I think it's closer than the line indicates. Utah State at UNLV, a big-time Mountain West matchup. Utah State, super underrated. They absolutely dominated Nevada. They're up 41-0 at halftime last week. Beating UNLV, though, is going to be a different test. I think the Aggies have the potential to do it. They're only 4-point underdogs, and while UNLV has a better record, the Rebels have been close to having the same record as Utah State. I think that Utah State is going to pull off the upset here. I think that UNLV has shown some major concerns, and this Utah State offense can expose this UNLV defense. UCLA at Ohio State. Ohio State remains undefeated, had a little bit of a hiccup last week against Purdue in the first half, but found a way to take care of business. Now the Buckeyes are 31.5-point favorites, and while UCLA still clings to bowl eligibility, that's going to end this weekend. Ohio State is just the better team. I don't think that UCLA, well, they've been fun to watch. The storyline of Jerry Neuheisel has been fun. Tim Skipper, what he's done with this team since taking over as the interim head coach has been exciting, but playing Ohio State is a completely different challenge that I don't think that they're prepared for, or at least able to win. Texas at Georgia. This is a familiar battle because we saw them play multiple times last year. These two teams have gone in different directions ever since the season started. Texas was supposed to be the best team in the country, has fallen off quite a bit, and then bounced back as of recently. Georgia was near the top of the entire country, has had some hiccups of their own, but remains in a good position. They're 8-1. Texas is 7-2. Now, the big question is going to be, or I should say, let's start with the storylines. The biggest storyline for both teams is the quarterback play. Texas has Arch Manning, and obviously we've talked about Arch Manning all year. The beginning of the year was not good. It was not a good year, or at least start to the year, for Arch Manning. Since then, though, he has kind of figured some things out and maybe is playing to the level that we all anticipated he would. 2,123 yards passing for him, 18 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions. So his numbers are getting better and better. You've also seen him be fairly efficient as a runner, 69 carries for 203 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, the rushing attack for Texas has had its moments, but overall has been relatively disappointing. Trey Wisner, 338 yards and 3 touchdowns to lead this team. The return of CJ Baxter hasn't yielded as much as we would have hoped, but this is still a rushing attack that has shown its moments of being an explosive group. Now, the passing attack has really all hinged on Arch Manning, but there is still a lot that needs to continue improving. Now, what Ryan Ringo's status is going forward in terms of his health, in terms of whether or not he's at 100%, is the big question. But if he is, he's been really fun. DeAndre Moore has stepped up. Parker Livingstone has been kind of that consistent player all year. Even Emmett Mosley has stepped up as well recently. So this is a passing attack that really hinges on Arch Manning and the offensive line. We'll talk more about them here in a second, but Arch Manning has been so much fun to watch as of recently. So good, and made a lot of decisions that really bring back the hype. And when we started this year, I think you saw some of the things with Arch Manning that you knew that he was capable of making the right choice. And even against Ohio State, when he struggled mightily, there were times where he wanted to make throws, but made a decision not to. When you watch the film, it was clearly the right choice. He just wanted to make plays so bad. So part of it is on him. Part of it's on his wide receivers. Part of it's on an offensive line that recently has stepped up in a big way. You look at the Vanderbilt game, they looked very good, and that score was closer than the game actually was. But the big question we had for Texas was, can you do that again against a team in Georgia that has better athletes, similar athletes to what you have, because Texas had better athletes. They had more talent than Vanderbilt. Now you look at Georgia. Georgia is going to replicate what Texas has in terms of talent, in terms of ability. That is not going to be an advantage that Texas has. So how does Arch Manning and this passing attack, how does the offense go against what should be a very tough team to beat in Georgia? Now, when you look at this Texas defense, they've kept this team in games time and time again. Have they had their moments of struggles? Yeah, absolutely. But this has been the group that is the biggest reason why they're 7-2 and not worse than that. Stopping this Georgia offense will be a challenge. But kind of similar to Texas in a way, Georgia's offensive line has shown that it can be exploited, that it can be exposed, and that's a group that can potentially create some opportunities for Texas. This defensive line for Texas has been an absolute menace. Colin Simmons is an absolute nightmare to block. You've also seen other guys benefit from his presence, right? So you've seen Ethan Burke step up, as of recently, at least. The linebackers behind them, Anthony Hill Jr., Trey Moore, they've been solid. This is a group that is going to give Texas a fighting chance in this game, and it just comes down to what Texas' offense can do. Because if the offense can play well, then I think that they're in a good position to make plays and potentially win this football game. That is going to be a big question, though. What is the offense capable of doing, and how do they make it so that they're still in fighting chance when it gets to the fourth quarter? Now, for Georgia, they've also had questions about their quarterback, just maybe not as much as Texas. People had concerns about Gunnar Stockton well before this year. Last year, they had concerns about him. This year, there were concerns about his abilities. Now, is he the most talented quarterback? No, but that doesn't matter right now. He is playing really well as of late. And Mike Bobo has things really dialed in, and Stockton's just made the right reads. He's getting his rhythm in this offense, and a big part that's helped him is this rushing attack. The rushing attack had some concerns coming into this year. We knew what Nate Frazier could do, but outside of Nate Frazier, we had questions about who was going to be the player to step up. Chauncey Bowens has been that guy. And Frazier and Bowens have been a really good combination and have given Gunnar Stockton a lot of confidence for what he can do on the football field going forward. The rushing attack gives them balance so that teams can't just focus on Gunnar Stockton. Now, you brought in some transfer portal talent to be able to help Stockton as well. Zachariah Branch has lived up to the expectations. We'd like to see him get a little bit more involved in the offense, make more explosive plays, but right now you're just doing what you can to win football games. Colby Young has been solid at times. London Humphreys has shown explosive plays. The tight end position, I think, does not get enough love. Oscar Delp has been good. Lawson Lucky has had his flashes of good play. So there are plenty of things for Texas's defense to worry about. But it's also what gives Gunnar Stockton the confidence he has. He knows that he has players downfield that he can hit. He knows that he has guys that are going to be open. And that is a nice thing to feel as a quarterback, to know that you have the comfort of somebody's going to be open. It's just a matter of, again, going through progressions. Because once again, Gunnar Stockton is not the most talented quarterback in college football. However, if he goes through his progressions and he knows, okay, read number 1 is going to be here. If he's not open, go to read 2. Then if you have to go to your check down, then you go to that. And he's done a great job of that. He's not playing outside of himself. He's playing within his game, and he's playing with what makes him so good. This offense is going to be fun to watch against this Texas defense because it's going to be a battle. And both of these defenses, I think, are going to give the opposing offense some trouble. Now, while Georgia doesn't necessarily have that alpha that we've been talking about consistently, this is a group that's been, I think, competing at a high level. Maybe not winning at a high level as consistently as we've seen in the past, but competing. Kirby Smart's group is, I think, very young at certain positions. The one thing that he's done is he's found a way to say, guys, if you play hard, if we play hard consistently, we're going to be in position to win football games. And it feels like whenever they had a game that maybe they're not playing their best or struggling, they just kept competing and they've been in the game. They have been in position to potentially win. And sometimes that's really all you can ask for. That's something that really all you're going to be able to do is give yourself a chance. And Georgia has done well in those games. They're 8-1, and they're still in that conversation for an SEC title. They're still in the playoff conversation. And this is an opportunity for them to once again show that they can do that. I'm going to go with Georgia because I trust what they do consistently. Texas has had success recently, but they've also been playing weaker competition that doesn't have the talent level that they do. This is a big test for both sides. Georgia has an opportunity to make a statement. Texas wants everybody to know that, hey, we're still a good team and we're a much different team than we were at the beginning of the year. Still going to go with Georgia. I think they get the job done. They're going to win this game, and it has a huge effect either way on which team wins. Virginia Tech at Florida State. While Virginia Tech is clinging to bowl eligibility and Florida State hasn't been great, and this is really not a game that I expect to go in favor of the Hokies. Now, this is a team that's playing a little bit better since they've fired Brent Pry, but I think this is going to be a tough test. Florida State isn't as good as we maybe thought they were coming into the year, or at least at the beginning of the year, but they're still going to be a tough team to defeat if you're Virginia Tech. Florida State is a 13.5-point favorite, and I just don't trust the Hokies defense to stop this Seminoles offense. There's too much explosive talent. There's too much physicality, and I think that Florida State's defense also will give Kyron Jones or whoever's playing quarterback for Virginia Tech in this one a lot of trouble that could potentially give them some obstacles that they're not ready to hurdle yet. Mississippi State at Missouri, two teams that are kind of the surprises of the SEC, but maybe taking a couple steps back as of recently. Mississippi State's 5-5, Missouri 6-3, and the Tigers are 7-point favorites. Even with Matt Zollers, who struggled last week, taking over as quarterback, I think that Missouri is still the more talented team, and they'll figure a way out to win this one. But Mississippi State is a tough team, still going to be tough to beat, but I trust that Missouri can get the job done at home. TCU saw its Big 12 title hopes vanish last week with a loss to Iowa State. And that's unfortunate because that could have made this game against BYU so much more important. That being said, this is still going to be a fun matchup. The fact that it's at BYU is a big reason why BYU is favored by 5.5 points. They're coming off a disappointing loss as well, but I trust that the Cougars will bounce back. If Josh Hoover plays really well, then TCU is going to be in position to potentially make this one more interesting. But playing at BYU is always going to be a challenge. To be able to beat the Cougars at home means you have to not only beat a good football team, but you have to beat a crowd that's going to be a factor. It's going to be a part of this game that you have to navigate. To be able to get your silent counts going, to communicate with your teammates is a challenge that a lot of teams face when they play BYU on the road. And the Cougars are very good at home. And the fact that they are, even though they're still, they lost last week, they're still in the Big 12 title hopes conversation, and they're still very much ready to bounce back. I think that they could have a solid game. They got beat up by Texas Tech. TCU is not Texas Tech. And again, BYU is still in control of their destiny. They're still very much able to win the Big 12, but they got to find a way to bounce back from last week, find some momentum, and beat a TCU team that, even though they lost, is still capable of beating BYU. I am going to pick BYU to win this game. I am going to pick the Cougars to bounce back from a tough loss. TCU is good, but playing again at BYU is always going to present some challenges that, if you're not ready for, could get out of hand very quickly. Final game we'll discuss is Boise State at San Diego State. The Aztecs, for people who didn't watch, lost to Hawaii this past weekend. It was one of the last games of the night. Actually, it was the last game of the night, and Hawaii takes it to San Diego State, giving Boise State a lot of confidence that their title hopes are still alive and that San Diego State is a beatable team. Also, don't sleep on Hawaii. They're still also in this conversation. They're right behind both of these teams. But Boise State trying to find a way to defend their title, trying to find a way to defend their Mountain West crown against a San Diego State team that's played really well as of recently. And this is going to be interesting. I'm very curious to see what the status of Maddox Manson is for this one, because that, I think, dictates how I feel about this game. The rushing attack has been not as good as last year, obviously, but still solid. Dylan Riley and Sire Gaines have been pretty good. Malik Sherrod has been a dynamic player for them as well. You also look at the passing attack. This is where you really want Maddox Madsen to play. If he's not able to go, then maybe you have a few more concerns about what this team could do. Chris Marshall's been very good for them, averaging nearly 19 or nearly 20 yards per catch. Latrell Caples has been solid, but again, if Madison's not able to go, then maybe you're in a tougher position than you might have liked. The defense has been kind of all over the place at times, and I think that you've seen some good things from this group, but you've also seen this group struggle. So which group do we get? That's going to be the biggest question. You're facing a San Diego State team that has not been overly consistent, and last week we saw Hawaii take away a rushing attack that was their driving force behind their success. Jaden Denegal is very underrated, but he's also a guy that you can take advantage of in terms of creating turnovers. And this is a Boise State team that at times has done that, and they'll have an opportunity to shut down this rushing attack. Basically dare San Diego State to throw the football, dare them to beat you through the air. That's going to be a big thing that Boise State can do to be able to take over this game. And if they're able to do that, you'll do exactly what Hawaii was able to do this past weekend. Now, Boise State does not have the offense that Hawaii does right now, especially if Madsen's not able to go. So that's going to be a big key. And again, I haven't seen an update on Maddox Madsen officially, so we'll see what happens there. But this defense has the ability to shut down San Diego State's offense and make this game a lot more in their favor. San Diego State is a 2.5-point favorite, and they're playing at home, which obviously helps. Jaden Denegal, plain and simple, has to play better. When teams are taking away the run, he has to be more of a factor with his arm. He's completing just under 60% of his passes, over 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns, 7 picks. Lucky Sutton has been the big reason why they've had success offensively. 898 yards and 8 touchdowns. However, you saw last week what happens when he doesn't have as much of a factor in this game, play as much of a factor. That is going to be a big problem if they're not able to do that. Does the passing attack have what it takes? Jordan Napier has been electric for them. He's been very good. Donovan Brown has shown up at times too. So it's not that they don't have talent. They just need consistency. Now, San Diego State's defense also has its strengths. And this is a group that's been very good. We talked about Trey White coming to the year and how good he was last season. But we also discussed how much talent this team had to potentially help him. And while his numbers are not as good as last year, this is a group that has taken huge strides. They're one of the best defenses in college football when it comes to scoring defense, total defense. Those different things that they've been able to improve are a big reason why Trey White has not been as successful statistically. He's still a very good player. That much hasn't changed. It's just that other people are taking his stats from him because everybody else is getting better. That being said, Trey White is still very much someone you have to worry about if you're Boise State. He is an absolutely disruptive force, and he'll be a reason why San Diego State has success in this game and the rest of the season. If San Diego State can hold Boise State in check, especially if the quarterback position is uncertain for the Broncos, this is going to be a low-scoring affair, and I think that's going to be that way anyways. I don't think that these two offenses are going to love playing against the defenses that they face. I don't think that either one is particularly explosive coming into this game either. So that kind of goes in San Diego State's favor. And this will be fun. Spencer Danielson and Sean Lewis are two very underrated coaches. And I think Sean Lewis has a bright future wherever he's going to end up because I think he's going to get a Power 4 opportunity. But Boise State is a tough team to beat, especially if they are still in the title race. We've seen, even when they're not having the best year, they are still a team to worry about. They are still a team that's tough to beat. And the lore, if you will, of Boise State sometimes plays a factor. The fact that they've been so good for so long sometimes gets to teams. So for San Diego State to win this game, they have to move on past that. They have to not worry about what this Boise State team has done in the past and get back to what they've done in this season. The Hawaii game wasn't great, but you got to bounce back. You have to find ways to be better. You have to find ways to win. And sometimes that means just hitting a reset and focusing on the task at hand. I'm going to pick San Diego State to win. I think that they're going to bounce back, but this one is going to be an absolute battle. And if you are looking for an underrated game to finish your night in week 12, this is the game that I would highly recommend.